Today we are going to start with the Java 8. So far whatever we have learned was up to Java 7, and Java 8 introduced quite a new features. So, and learning Java 8 is also very important because it helps us do the same thing but in very few lines of code. So we are going to do this completely hands-on based, the Java 8 complete all the concepts we are going to learn by doing hands-on. So let's see what are the new features introduced in Java 8. So this is my plain normal Java project, and I've created a notes.txt file to take up notes. So let's say features in Java 8, the features that was introduced in Java 8. So first feature was enhancement that was made to the interface. So interface enhancements. Yeah. The second feature we introduced was functional interface. Functional interface. We're going to look at what they are one by one. Third was lambda expression. Lambda expression. Fourth was stream API. And fifth was a whole new date and time API, because it was not that easy to manipulate date and time in Java 7. So Java 8 introduced a completely new set of date time classes to do the manipulation of date and time easily. So we are going to look at each of these topics in detail. Okay, let's start. So I will go ahead and first create a package. So let me create a package here. I will say interface enhancement. I'll create the package like this. And then now we will learn what are the new things that was introduced in part of the interface enhancement. So let's go ahead, write down this one, some notes about this. So in the interface enhancement, the first thing that was done was default method were introduced. Default method were introduced. Second, static method were also introduced. So introduction of default method and introduction of static method. You will see them, what they are, but these were the two things that were done. So now let's go ahead and create some classes to see what they are. So let's go ahead and first see how we used to have a Java 7 interface. So let's say an interface in Java 7. So I will say a vehicle is an interface. And let's say in Java 7. So I will say vehicle Java 7 interface. So let me create that interface. So this is an interface. So what we used to have? Let's say we used to have a method. Let's say I will say void details was one method, let's say, and then I will say a property as a string color. So by default, what was the situation here? We have to basically initialize it. So I will say red. So by default, what is in Java 7? This method is public, abstract. Whether you say or not, the by default the method becomes public and abstract. And same for the variable also we have certain conditions. So by default the variables become public, static, and final. So this was in Java 7. By the way, we are using Java 8 in our project structure. If you go, you can see it's Java 8, but it doesn't mean that you cannot use Java 7 syntax. Everything is fine. I mean, Java 8 is backward compatible to Java 7, so we can use that. So what we used to know, our method by default become public and abstract. And our variables become public, static, final. By default, we don't have to do anything. This was Java 7. Now let's go ahead and create an interface, how it looks in the Java 8. So let me go ahead and create the same interface, but with Java 8. So class vehicle Java 8. So I will say interface. Here, if I create the same method here, like void details, and I try to give let's say I want to try to give a body to it, it will start complaining. But Java 8 has a new type of method, introduce a new type of method called default. As soon as I put this default, then I can have a method with body inside the interface, where I can write some code. So I can say system.out.println I am Java 8 default method. And this default methods by default is available to all the implementing classes. By default gets available to all implementing classes. So if you see, it's not a public abstract method, rather it is a default method which we can have body. Now let's go ahead and create a class. Let's say class name is car, and this car class can now implement the vehicle interface. If you see now, this car class is not complaining that you need to implement this interface. You might have seen that in many a times, we basically, whenever we have an interface, here, let's say I make it as interface Java 7, as soon as I do, it will complain that you have unimplemented methods in this interface. So the class car should give some implementation to it. Only then this will go away. If I do this, then the error disappears. But what if I have a requirement that I don't want to implement it in my child class, but still I want to have a method which should have some logic inside it. So that's where the default method helps. And as said, default method gets automatically available inside the class who is implementing the interface. So let's create public. Let me create here public static void main. I can create the main method here itself to test it. Void main, and I will say string. Let's say string array a, and inside that what I will do, I will just create the object of this car class. Inside this car is equal to new car, And now I can directly call the car details here. So I haven't given any implementation in this class, car class, for this inter method details, but still I am able to use that directly. I can call it directly. So let's run it. See, similarly, if I create another class here, let's say bus, and the bus also implements this vehicle Java 8, then also bus will be able to utilize that functionality of details without giving any implementation. So now you must be wondering, what was the use of introducing this default method? So let's understand. So for that to understand, let's do one thing. I will create another class here. Let's say I will create the class as bus, and then I will say bus is a class, and this will also implements Java vehicle Java 8. So now, and bus has a, let's say, method void show, and then let's say here it can use the bus p is equal to new bus. By default, if you see it, the details is available here, but we can say b dot details. Okay, now it's good. Let's say I have done this functionality and I have two classes which is implementing this interface. So if, let's say, if it was Java 7, so I could say 7 here. It will not, here it will say I have to implement it. Okay, let me implement it. Let's say it is there. Good. Here also in the car, let's say I have Java 7, which is good. And now it will say, okay, you have to implement it. That is fine. Now let's say there are similarly 10 Java classes implementing this Java 7 interface. And now if I need to introduce a new feature, then what I have to do? I have to go into this Java interface. Let's say I have to introduce a new feature called void mileage. As soon as I do this, what will happen? It will force my Java class to also implement that functionality, but I don't want to implement here also. So if I have 10 classes, all the 10 classes will be forced to implement that functionality. If I have 100 classes, then I have to go and change each and every other class. So for the backward compatibility, this default method is very useful. So if I change this to Java 7 or Java, another one, Java 8, and I don't need this, let's say, yeah. And I also make this as Java 8. So if you see here, let's say here we had a method void mileage, which is a public abstract. So the car would have implemented it. Great. And bus would have implemented it. So this is nothing new. This is like Java 7 only. Let for now to comment this. Comment this. Okay, great. Now if I wanted to introduce a new feature in my interface, or let's say in my classes, I want to introduce a new feature in my classes without changing the class. I don't have to touch the class. So that's where the power of default methods come. If I introduce a default method here, I can introduce a new functionality in all my classes. See here and here also. I can use it right away without changing the class. If any class wants to use it, this new functionality, they will use it like this. But if this class, let's say, doesn't want to use it, you don't have to touch this class. So that's the power of Java 8 default method. This default method supports backward compatibility. If there is a project with already lot of Java classes who is implementing an interface, and in that project you want to go and suddenly introduce a new functionality without changing any Java class, that's where this feature is helpful. Default method. It's for backward compatibility. And what you have to do, just put default keyword in front of your method. Let's say if I put default here. See, I can make another default method also here. So this is also great. You can have as many as default methods in your interface and introduce new functionalities without changing your classes. So if I say mileage, see, great. And if I don't want to use it in bus, I will not use it. So so default methods, you can have many default methods, helps to support backward compatibility.